I really don't know why I'm even talking about this, because it should be a moot subject for anybody who honors God, who leans upon His name, and who claims His grace and His mercy in any way. But the question comes, how much can we joke about God? How much can we question His grace, His honor, His honesty, everything about Him? Because God lives in the unseen for right now. And so many times it's kind of like when the cat's away, the mice will play type of thing. And like the people in the Old Testament many times would said, God is not looking. God takes no consideration of what is going on right now. And so they would make remarks that would bring down the wrath of God upon their heads just because they were defiling His holy name. They were defiling His holy presence. And they were bringing down very low the whole personage of the great Creator. I'm thinking about a grave in southeastern Ohio. And if you go to that area, I would say that anybody could tell you where it is. But it's called the infidels' grave. And in this grave is buried a man who was very much against the reality of God. He was an atheist. He was against any preaching of the gospel. And he made a comment that if there was a God, he wanted snakes to infest his grave. And of course, in time, the man passed away. And he made a great statue of himself over his grave. And the people say that snakes are constantly being killed coming out of that grave. And the picture that I saw on the internet, they have built a fence around the grave so that nobody can get near the statue, because there's so many snake holes that it is unstable at the foundation of the statue. And the picture that I saw, there were snakes, dead snakes hanging on the fence. And the writer said that any time during the season, you can go out there and see snakes there. There was a grave in Tennessee that a man, and I don't really know the full story, but the man hated God. The man was against everything that God stood for. And he said that he was going to hide himself from the Creator by having his family bury him in the crevice of a mountain or a hill or a rock. And his gravesite would be in that crevice. What happened was the mountain or the rock is now 15 feet away from the grave, and the grave is completely in the open. You do not mock God. You do not challenge Him to show you His power. Because when you do, you are asking for creative power to be manifest. And friends, we can't take that. we cannot stand before that. Elisha, when he was coming back from the taking up of his master Elijah the prophet, and of course the story goes that Elisha was a bald man, had no hair, and he had asked the master Elijah, he said, grant me this wish. He said, if I could, I would like to have a double portion of your spirit. And Elijah told him, he said, you've asked a hard thing. But he said, if you see me go up, if you see me all the way, go up, he said, your request will be granted. And of course that happened that way. And as Elisha was going back through a small village from the spot where his master had been taken up, and they had looked for the body of Elijah for a long time, and they did not find him. They thought that maybe the wind had picked him up and dropped him someplace. But there were children that came out and mocked Elisha and said, go up, thou bald head, go up. What they were saying is, be taken away like your master. We want to see you fly. And Elisha turned to these rebellious, reprobate children and cursed them. And the Bible says that 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore these children severely. You do not play with God. You do not invoke his righteous anger. Shamgar, a judge in Israel, was going out to battle against the enemy of Israel. And he said, if you will let me take vengeance on this army, Lord, I will sacrifice the first person that comes out to meet me in my victory. Now that was an ignorant statement. God does not honor a fool. But because he had promised victory to Israel, he kept his promise. But he also required Shamgar to keep his promise, because the first one to come out to meet him was his daughter. And he had to sacrifice her to God. Was God willing that that should have happened? That was probably not in his great heart that anybody would do that. But we do not make foolish remarks. We do not make foolish and unwarranted promises. We do not mess or fool around or mock somebody or something that we know nothing about. Because this one that we're mocking is not like playing with electricity or playing with a tree that's about to fall. This, pardon me, this being knows where you're at. This being knows who you are. And this being has heard your mocking. And when the time comes, he'll know where to find you. That's the difference between a falling tree or electricity. You can play around with water. You can play around with electricity. You can play around with dynamite even. And you may get by with it. You play with a being that has a superior mind, superior consciousness, and you will be found and you will be required of those words. God bless you. God keep you. Strengthen you in the power of Him. And may you always count your words, that they might be a blessing instead of a curse. Maranatha.